Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Tom Salfield, the CEO of Wikifactory. Good evening in your case, Tom. How you doing?
Good evening. Nice to meet you, Mark.
Yeah, you're in. I know you're in the UK. You in what city?
I'm actually in the countryside in Derbyshire, a place called the Peak District. I was lucky to end up here. I was on holiday when things started to get bad in Spain, where I normally live. So I ended up coming back here where I'm originally from, actually.
Interesting. I actually I'd spent some time in a town called Hitchin in Ipswich. Have you been? Are they near you?
No, that's down in I guess in East Anglia.
Yeah.
So we're up north.
Oh, okay.
But the UK is a small place, of course, so it's not so far.
So can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Sure. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Wikifactory. So that's what I'm currently doing. We're a social platform for collaborative product development, and we're building a distributed kind of open standards-based, what we call an internet of production, which is about opening up the access to future production technologies, which are kind of available inside big industry, big engineering companies right now, and we're making those available to everyone by creating kind of open standards-based APIs for linking specifications and manufacturing capacity. So it's all about product development and making that a faster thing. I guess in terms of my background, I have originally studied philosophy and economics at the LSE. Worked for a little while in economics, in kind of development in international economics. Got a little bored, I guess, with writing reports. Wanted to do something a bit more practical, and then moved into computing and did an MSc in computing science. And always worked since then in different kinds of social innovation, social enterprise kind of related stuff. I was quite interested in monetary theory from my time at London School of Economics, and got into monetary theory and how we can create new currencies pretty early on, and started a thing called OpenCoin with some others back in 2008, like just before the Bitcoin papers came out. So I was kind of in it too early, and I didn't think Bitcoin would go anywhere when I saw that. So I was like, go on to the next thing. And I was involved in starting a thing called Impact Hub, which was a co-working space and a social innovation, social enterprise community. There's now, I think, something like 100 spaces in 50 countries around the world. So it's probably the biggest social enterprise community in the world still. And yeah, since then, I did a lot of tech consulting, working for small companies, prototyping, building architectures, and so on. And then, yeah, met some cool people and got excited about doing Wikifactory. Back in, we started working on it back in 2015 properly.
Interesting. And that OpenCoin product, was that an early blockchain company?
So it was pre-blockchain, it was pre-Bitcoin, but nevertheless cryptocurrency. So there's some kind of pre-Bitcoin, more centralized technology for creating anonymous digital cash, created by a guy called David Chaum, who's one of the very famous cryptographers from the 1970s. And that I think went out of patent. Deutsche Bank, I believe, held the patent, and it went out of patent just before we started doing it. So we thought there's an opportunity to create an open implementation of that. So yeah. In fact, when Satoshi released the initial Bitcoin paper, we were mentioned immediately in the conversation thread, because we were one of the few cryptocurrency projects that was actually around at the time.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it is. Of course, we don't know who he was. But.
Yeah. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as an employer and an employee?
Yeah, so I mean, I've never really been employed very much, I must admit. I've done a fair amount of consulting, but employment isn't something that I'm too aware of from the employee side. But when, like, I guess 15 years ago, I kind of began doing remote type work as soon as I got into tech, because we would hang around in this thing called IRC, Internet Relay Chat, which was, you know, how the geeks used to do online collaboration back then. And so just meet many people in online communities there. And at the time, I think people thought it was weird that, you know, you would meet people over text and feel like you knew them, start setting up contracts and actually, you know, working together on things properly. You never even seen these people, and there's many people I worked with then who I've still never seen and don't know what they look like. You know, video conferencing was a rarer thing back then, I guess. But there are many advantages to working in text-based ways, which is what we discovered at the time, because of course you can always refer back to conversations. You can have 5, 6 different conversations at the same time, which can improve your efficiency in working with lots of people. So I think people underestimate the benefits of text-based organization, but it does require a very, you know, different way of working to what people are used to if they're used to working in an office.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember I was on early chats, you know, before 2000, and I remember we thought it was so cool when we got a 56K modem. It was so much faster. And then when DSL came out, it's like, oh my God, how will we ever use this? And I think it's come a long way since then.
Yeah. Video chat now works as well. So I mean, video conferencing now works. Which
but remember back then, video conferencing, the big companies had video conferencing. They had separate rooms and thousands of dollars worth of equipment to do that.
Yeah, it was a big luxury for sure.
And I think they had T1 lines and all that stuff to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with Wikifactory, I mean, we've always been, I guess, a partially remote company, in the sense that we had an office that was in Madrid, where the majority of the team were, but we had some people in Germany, some people in China, some people in Denmark. So we were in that kind of thing. Of course, people work from home from time to time. We're a tech company, and that makes sense. So so in some ways, it feels like this kind of shift that we've just had has been in a way a positive one, because, you know, there was a bit the idea that if you're in the office, you're in the loop. If you're out of the office, you're out of the loop to some degree. And of course now it's important that we, you know, for everyone, that we organize that in a much clearer way. So documenting everything becomes much more important, making it clear that there's like one place where you can find out everything you need to know about any particular topic. Those sorts of things make a big difference, and I guess we're shifting the way we're working, and that's something that I guess it takes time to accommodate to, but it's I think it's actually a positive thing, also you know, in many respects, right? But also because from a talent perspective, we can now recruit around the world and aren't so restricted to one location.
This is true. Yeah, it's actually, I've had a couple CEOs tell me that COVID basically has even the playing field for the people that were supposedly out of the loop because they didn't come into the office.
Yeah.
Now everybody's either in or out of the loop, depends on how you look at it.
Either everybody's out of the loop or
and I think that's been a challenge too for people. So what do you think is the future of remote employment? And what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective? I'm assuming your product is one of those things.
That's true. So I mean, we're focused on product development specifically, and I think that there are challenges for depending on the different kinds of work you're doing. For example, yes, in product development, there are lots of CAD files that people are sharing around the place. There's lots of different formats. So collaboration services that allow you to view all of those formats, to have interoperability between those formats, to do version control and so on, are very important in helping people collaborate, you know, when they're working remotely. And I mean, of course, this isn't so much purely about remote work, um, but in a sense, so manufacturing is an area that we're in. So we help people collaborate on the product designs, but we also help people connect with manufacturers and automatically produce with those manufacturers. So their manufacturing supply chains have been kind of affected massively because of people not being able to go to work, and there aren't remote ways of manufacturing to the same degree right now. So when we think about remote work, usually we're thinking about people doing information work. But I think increasingly what we're going to see now is a move towards automation in manufacturing, which was, again, a trend which was happening anyway. But it's going to become more important in terms of making sure that supply chains aren't disrupted. And so we're going to have like remote factories where we can send API calls to factories and have things produced.
Wow, that's really cool. So, what is the story behind Wikifactory, and what's the journey been like?
So originally, I guess we came up with the idea of Wikifactory when a bunch of the co-founders were working on a project called WikiHouse, which was originally an art project, which is an open source housing construction system. So we were working with an architecture firm on that, and we built some of the technology for it. And at some point, they got a TED talk, and they had a million views because it was actually at the proper TED conference. So it was a big thing, and there was a huge amount of attention on the project. And the question we had was, how do you turn that attention into, and all of that energy into collaboration and effective development of the project? Which to a certain degree we did manage, but there was a lack of tools, right? There's a lack of the kinds of tools that you'd had if you were in the software development world. You would have been getting people onto your GitHub account, getting people working together in that way, forking the project maybe. None of that was possible in the hardware world. So it was a question of putting together a bit of Google Docs and Google Drive, a bit of this kind of tool and that kind of tool, a wiki here and whatever. So you kind of ended up with a fairly disjointed setup, and it was a lot of the energy that could have been channeled into developing the project was lost, and you end up with information overload and all of that. So we basically started thinking about it back then. I think that was as early as 2012, and as 2015 when we finally decided, well, no one else seems to be really doing this. Let's go ahead and build it.
Very interesting. So it sounds like you kind of, for manufacturers, you're a one-stop shop for the product lifecycle. Is that true?
Yeah, for product developers and for manufacturers. So we kind of distinguish between the two. So at the moment, what we've built is more of a collaboration tool for the product developers. And the next phase that we're working on right now is about integrating manufacturers and making that process of working with manufacturers to build a specification for the product you're going to actually manufacture, to make that a lot more streamlined. Right now, it involves people sending a lot of emails backwards and forwards, or even going to the factory and working with the engineers in the factory. And so we think we can make that process a whole lot clearer and a whole lot more simpler by basically having something like Google Docs type, real-time collaboration system for working on these 3D files and the mechanical specifications of them.
Yeah. So it sounds like you started about 5 years ago, and you started out as a remote company. How did you incorporate that, starting out, as opposed to, the typical company starts with an office and then slowly goes remote? You did it from day one, right?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, because one of our co-founders was in China, and so the four of us were not always in the same place, although we did spend a bit of time out there in China as well. So how we incorporated.
Well, how did you just started? I mean, it sounds like it was just organic. It just came natural because you had to, right?
Yeah, of course. And I guess as a team, we're all people that are fairly used to working in a virtual way. But of course, as you grow, it becomes harder because you start having a team and employees and so on. and there's a natural tendency, I think, for people to think, well, we should have an office, because when you want to start working with people and you need the place to do it, and you don't want to spend your time hanging around in cafes. We started off, I guess, hanging around in cafes in Madrid when we went back there. With three of us went there, right? And that worked while there were three of us, and then you hired a couple more people, and it's like, well, we can't really just take the whole cafe, so we better get an office.
Yeah, Starbucks works well, but they only have so much patience, right? Yeah. So the ongoing pandemic caused basically the whole world to go remote. In the Bay Area, it was on March 16th. You already were remote, but did that cause any challenges or roadblocks that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, we weren't fully remote back then. So we actually had, I would say 50, something like 16 people in an office in Madrid, and the rest of our team was distributed around the world. But the core of it was there. So I mean, it did create a change in the way we're organizing, for sure. Like I say, I mean, there was definitely some kind of teething problems. Like there are a few things that do remain problematic, like just simple stuff. Like some people don't know how to use certain tools.
Mm-hmm.
Normally you'd have kind of ad hoc training sessions where someone would just sit down next to them and support them to do it. You can't do that anymore in quite the same level of convenience. So, I mean, it's still possible, of course. We can do a Zoom call, we can share screens and all of that, but we, we don't like necessarily like have that culture built up of doing things. And I think the other big thing that you miss is that kind of ad hoc conversations that you're going to overhear while you're doing something else, while you're in the kitchen. And the opportunity to just walk past and quickly check up what someone's doing, have a conversation while you're going somewhere else. You tend to end up with this kind of slightly more formal way of arranging times when you're going to speak to people, which has its advantages, of course.
Right.
But you miss out on a whole bunch of that kind of ad hoc,
Yeah,
spontaneous things that just happen.
Both a pro and a con. I mean, the pro is that you have more uninterrupted time, but the con is you don't have those, 5-minute conversations that's all you needed.
Exactly, yeah. And we've tried to do like bits and pieces that help from that perspective. Like we have a twice a week, just half an hour hangout call.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really any agenda. It's just checking in for coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
Occasionally we have a drink session, that kind of thing.
Yeah. A lot of companies are doing that.
Yeah, and it helps, for sure. To also build team morale and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And you get a little insight into how people live their lives and their families and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Especially if they have little kids.
Yeah, it can be challenging. And of course, there's a difference between working from home and working from home in these conditions.
Yes.
Which can be very different depending on your situation and setup. For a lot of people in Madrid, it's very hard because Madrid has the highest rate of flats, or Spain, I believe, has the highest rate of flat or apartment-based living in the world, or at least in Europe.
Wow.
So lots of people, are stuck in an apartment, where in the UK, most people, or a lot more people, would have houses with gardens.
Yeah.
And so being stuck literally inside in a flat with a child, I can imagine it's pretty hard to work for some of my colleagues in that situation.
Yeah, I actually have a nephew who lives in Madrid, and he and his wife have, I think it was 2 straight months they didn't go out.
Yeah, and it was really strict in that way. In the UK, it's been a little bit easier to just walk out onto the street, even if it's restricted, but it's not been completely banned.
Yeah, the same here. So there are companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products, especially for startups. And you're pretty much past the startup stage right now.
Oh no, we're very much a startup still.
For me?
Yeah, we're very much a startup still. Yeah.
Oh, you still are? Okay. So how important do you think setups like Gaper will be going forward for companies like yourself that need to hire talent? And the real key thing is the right talent and in a hurry.
Yeah, of course. So I mean, I think it's really important what you guys are doing. Having a pre-vetted and affordable talent pool is really a crucial thing when you're trying to grow a company. being able to have that on tap and scale as you need is a huge benefit. While we've been in the growth process to here, we've spent a lot of time on recruiting software developers, and it gets harder and harder to find the time to do that. So the more capacity that we have, and the easier it is to scale that capacity, then it's it's a really important thing.
Yeah.
I guess the market for software developers is always getting harder. And people like software developers are kind of inclined to work through peer-to-peer recommendations. They know that they're valuable, and they have a lot of options to choose from. And yeah, so as an employer, you need to prove your worth, and that that people should work with you, rather than the other way around in general.
Yes, and you're in Europe, so there's a lot of really talented software people in Europe. I come from Silicon Valley, which everyone says that's where they but there are a lot of talented people out there.
There certainly are, and I think the market is heating up here as well. It was the case that there was quite a lot of spare capacity in certain parts of Europe. London's always been fairly much a developer's market, but now we kind of see more and more startups opening in Spain, Germany, France, and actually everywhere. So there's always more demand and more opportunities for developers right now.
Yes, there is. Well, Tom, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been very enlightening.
Thank you, Mark. Great to meet you.
Yeah, you too, and have a great night.
You too. Thanks.